My memories of Groveland began in 1958 when my family moved here. My mom and my dad were both teachers, and frankly, my first remembrance of Groveland at all was when they came to Groveland to meet with Frank Farr, who was the principal at I guess it was Groveland Elementary then. I'm not quite sure if Groveland High School and Groveland Elementary were, well, they would be the same. Nick Matico was the assistant principal for the elementary school. But anyway, they were to meet here with Frank Farr, and we came into town and actually stayed with the Farrs at their house. So my first memory wasn't necessarily of staying at the Farrs' house, but it was going to the Groveland Theater on a Saturday afternoon, and we saw Sink the Bismarck. My brother, myself, and Frank Farr Jr. were all together at that. And so Frank was my first friend here. He was a couple of years older, but he was a friend until he died, which tragically happened when he was in high school running the mile. I happened to be on the side of the football field, or at the end of the football field at that time, watching, and happened to see that happen. Tragic event in my life, but one of my first remembrances of things that happened here. But we did move here, obviously, and my mom was teaching at Davis Elementary. My dad taught at Mascot, and they were lifelong teachers here. Since they were teachers, I guess we were fairly well known in the community. The community then was probably about 1,200 people. And because it was small, we tended to know who everybody was around. It was fairly nice. Most of our life revolved around three things, at least for our family, and that was school, work for my parents, and church. So essentially our social life, when it didn't have anything to do with school, was going to church and church activities. Back in those days, it was long distance to call Claremont. So Claremont and Groveland didn't mix all that well, and had a big rivalry during the school years, kind of like Florida FSU is now. The Y-Ette was the big social gathering place, at least for the school students. And for those that aren't familiar with the Y-Ette, that's where Kimmy's Flower happens to be right now. We would go there after football games. We would go there afternoons after school and kind of congregate there. Other early remembrances of Groveland were well, it was the fact that you could get most anything you wanted here at Edge's, which was the local go-to place for just about anything, except for automobiles. You had to go to Claremont for that. But Edge's had just about everything you would want. It seems like that growing up, everybody either worked part-time for Edge's or for B&W whenever they were processing fruit. The main industry was citrus, obviously at that time. If you weren't working in two of the other places, you might be out either picking or loading fruit. I did a small stint at loading fruit myself. Never picked too much, but it seemed to me during those days the economy thrived pretty well, at least until we had the first freeze and things slowed down a little. And I do remember that the growers at that time started replanting, and then we had the second freeze, and that pretty much knocked all that out. And we were, I'd say, the freezes were, I think, were 86 and 89. and we probably somewhere around 2,000 people at that time. So we had almost doubled in population since I arrived in town. Really don't know where everybody went because the city limits hadn't changed very much. But after that, the city has blossomed, obviously, from anybody that's been here now. I think we're up around 20,000 now, and that happened over the last 20 years. During I would say the early part of my adulthood, after I had graduated from high school, I went to, then it was Florida Technological University, after completing 2 years at Lake Sumter Junior College, both of which are not named that anymore. Neither is Groveland High School, so, you know, it's kind of like I didn't go to school at all. But when I left here, I figured that would be it. I wouldn't be coming back. And to my surprise, once graduating from college, I moved down for a short stint in Miami. Decided that Groveland wasn't so bad after all, and hitched up my pants and moved right back home. Got a job working for Jim Payne Insurance at the time as an insurance agent, and he subsequently sold his business to Bill Early Insurance, and I continued to work there. And it was during this time, I won't say I met my wife, because I had known her throughout my younger years in high school. Although she was a little bit younger, I didn't know her well, but most of my interaction came at church. But we got together again, and we got married in October of 1975. And it just so happens that during that time, the Groveland Volunteer Fire Department was being, I won't say reformed, but it was being rejuvenated. We had a new fire chief at that time. His name was Buck Tomlinson. He was putting together a 30-hour volunteer firefighter class that would give everybody that completed it a certificate that said they were a qualified firefighter with Firefighter 1. And I can remember that easily because it coincides with my wedding. We started this class with 15 other guys in September of 1975. Finished it in November of 75, and during the middle of that, obviously, I got married, went on our honeymoon, came back, finished the class, and became a firefighter. The chief, Buck Tomlinson, happened to get a job probably several weeks later. It wasn't very long after that, with the fire department at the Kennedy, well, it's the Kennedy Space Center now. It was Cape Canaveral at the time. Got a job there, so he moved over there, and we were without a fire chief. One of the requirements Groveland had at the time was the fire chief had to live in the city, and I happened to live in the city, and I happened to be one of the only ones that was even halfway interested in taking the job. And the city council appointed me fire chief, which essentially became my hobby throughout the following years as a chief. You know, volunteer departments in Florida are very difficult, it seems, to maintain. You've got a continuing influx of new people, and they tend to get jobs, to get married, and go to other things or whatever. So, you know, sometimes it was hard to get volunteers. Sometimes it was fairly easy. It was one of those feast or famine deals, but it was fun, for the lack of a better term. And we were a fire department. All we did was fight fires. Although we did have calls every now and then to get the cat out of the tree kind of deal. But because of the feast or famine effect with the volunteers, you never knew what to expect when it came to firefighting. I do remember on occasion fighting house fires with one other person. And believe it or not, several of those we were able to save. The fire department was located at City Hall at the time I joined. It was a garage on the back of City Hall, and the way we were alerted to fires by this time, the city had installed a siren, so somebody would call into the police department, report a fire. Police department would push a button, set off the siren, and we would rush to the fire station when we heard the siren. When we got there, a policeman would come by and tell us where the fire was, and of course we would load up and we would go to it. First fire I remember happened to be on Michigan Avenue in Groveland, down on Lake Audrey. It was a basement or a downstairs garage fire, and the garage was pretty much fully involved when we got there. This was as typical in the day. We rode on the sideboards of the truck or on the tailboard and pulled up to the fire, started unloading hose. And the reason I remember this so vividly is that we needed to attach a hose, a 2.5-inch fire hose, to a hydrant. So it happens the hydrant was a block away. So I pick up one end of the fire hose and I start off toward the hydrant. About halfway there, one of my firefighters picked up the hose. This happened to be, I believe, my brother-in-law at the time. Picked up a section of the hose and started pulling to help me. And then a little farther down the line, and somebody else picked up the hose. Well, by the time I got to the hydrant, I was so tired, the only thing I could do was to lay the hose down and let somebody else come and hook it up and turn the hydrant on. So that was my initiation into firefighting. That was probably early in 1976. My second vivid remembrance of fighting fires was on Gun Hill in Mascot, and it was an early morning, and we rode the tailboard of the old 51 American and France fire truck we had to Mascot in about 40-degree weather. It was an eye-opening experience. I don't believe I rode a tailboard after that. And of course today we don't do that at all. It's considered not safe. The fire department, when I joined it had, for protective equipment, a plastic fire helmet and turnout coats. So they were 3/4 length turnout coats we would wear. We did have rubber boots that were supplied, but our pants were blue jeans. So far cry from the turnout gear that we have today. Today our turnout gear covers us head to toe. We can stay in 800-900 degree temperatures a lot longer than we should, and we're much more protected than we were then. We also had two what we call SCBA, or self-contained breathing apparatus, when I joined, to share throughout the whole department. Had 2 spare bottles. And we had 2 trucks. One was American and France 1951 fire truck that the city had bought new, and the other was a front-mounted, you might call it a tanker now. It had a tank on the back of it and a front-mounted pump mounted where the front bumper goes, which happened to be built by previous firefighters before I came along. Bruce Ogden is one that comes to mind, and I'm pretty sure it was built at his shop at that time. But those were the early days of the fire department for my career. I talked to minute about how we were alerted to fires. Previous to that, we had what we call a call box on a pole over in front of the what is now being turned into the City Hall Annex. It has been a secondhand store, and prior to that it was Hank's Electric. I'm not quite sure what it was before that, but it was not diagonally, but across the street from, at that time, the Chevron station. Now the manager of the Chevron station was Al Story, and Al Story at that time was the fire chief. So people would call in a fire to Al Story. He would go across the street. He would pull the lever for the call box, or a person that was wanting to report a fire would come up and pull that lever, and they would stay there until the fire truck arrived and tell them where to go. Things have evolved since then. Now we use radios, we use cell phones, we use whatever else means to report fires, and we get the calls automatically from dispatchers, through CAD systems and this kind of thing. Things have changed quite a bit in all these years. But and this is digressing a little bit to my high school years, never considered being on the fire department at all. Probably never would have if it hadn't been for a friend of mine that suggested it. Prior to that, my only remembrance of the fire department was Wednesday nights when I was at the First Baptist Church on Cherry Street, waiting on my parents to get out of choir practice. And the fire department would pull on those Wednesday nights, at least once a month or twice a month, whatever, or once every 2 months, however it turned out to be, would go down to Lake Audrey and practice, or not Lake Audrey, but Lake David, just down the street from us, and practice whatever they did at that time. I have no idea what they were doing, because all I did was see the fire truck and the guys down there. But continuing on with my service in the fire department, we, as I said, we fought fires, and that was pretty much it until 1988, when, through an agreement with Florida Regional EMS, who did our transport, emergency ambulance transport at that time, and South Lake Hospital, they gave us the Jaws of Life, the rescue tools, and asked if we would be really willing to run rescue calls for accidents. And obviously we felt that this would be good for expanding our capabilities, so to speak. So we took on that and became the first fire department in South Lake County anyway to start running accident calls, or to at least be using heavy rescue equipment in accident calls. And that's kind of, it kind of brings back a situation I remembered a few years before that, where there was a car that came into Groveland running faster than it should have, going south on 19, did not make the curve of the railroad tracks, and basically went airborne and crashed into the side of Edge's feed store. And I believe there were 4 males in that car, 2 of which, maybe 3 of them, were killed right then. And I do remember that the guys that were there trying to get them out of the car, and these were all passerbys now, it wasn't any organized agency or anything, would come and just pretty much drag people out of cars. So beginning in 1988, for our fire department, we began a systematic approach to working automobile accidents or anything else. In my opinion, I think this got Claremont into the job of doing the same thing, because we did run an accident that happened to be in Claremont, and we showed up in Claremont to do work for them that I think they kind of felt like that they could do their own after that. I think we were first in several other things. One was first in getting high pressure self-contained breathing apparatus. The high pressure bottles would hold 4,500 pounds versus 3,000 pounds that the low pressure bottles handled, and were quite smaller. It was an upgrade to anything anybody else in the county had at that time. The only caveat was you had to have a 6,000 pound capability compressor to be able to fill the bottles. So since we got the high pressure air packs, we also got a high pressure air compressor to go with it. Another first for anybody in the county at that time. In 1988, 1988 was when we started doing the extrication with the rescue tools, but I believe it was probably around the mid-90s that we started running medical calls with EMS. Again, we were the first agency in South Lake County to start doing that. I think Leesburg was doing it in the north end of the county, and as far as the volunteer agency, Mid-Florida Lakes, I think, might have been doing the same, and I think Mascot Fire was, not Mascot, but Mount Dora Fire was. So again, this is a kind of another first that Groveland was able to do in our area. And then by that time, we started seriously considering what it would take to go to a full-time department. In 1999, I approached Lake County to see if they would help us as far as funding for one man to work 40 hours a week as on the fire department. Since we were already running calls for them, we were under contract with them to run calls in the county. And to my surprise, Lake County came with a counteroffer that said, hey, we'll help you pay the salaries of 3 guys if you'll put them on 24 hours. So that was the beginning of our transforming from a volunteer department to a career department. And as a part of that, I became the full-time chief, working a 24-hour shift, and 2 other volunteer firefighters we had took the other 2 spots. I believe it was, that was 99. Probably in 1981, we added 3 guys to the department and made 2 guys on during the shift. So we're gradually at this time going from volunteers, where you didn't know whether you were going to get 1, 2, or 15 people on a call, to an insured 2 people on a call. And since then we have grown to more than that. We're now up to, well, when I retired from the department in February, we were up to 34 firefighters. And that pretty much put us at 3rd in the county as far as personnel goes. And I believe the fire department now is getting ready to put on another 7 people, which will put the department up around 40 people. During my career, I would say that 2 things probably jump out at me as the most significant things I remember as far as calls go. The first was on a 4th of July afternoon, we got a call for a structure fire up on North Cherry Lake Road. And as was typical during that time, the 4th of July was a family day for the fire department. We would meet in the morning. We would do pretty much fire department and family get together all day long that would end up with firing of the fireworks for the 4th of July celebration that evening. And during that afternoon, we got a call for the house fire, so we all jumped in the trucks, which we happened to be right there with them, and raced to the fire. And the fire was in a home, kind of small home on Cherry Lake Road. Most of the family was outside, and said that the a young child, I think about a 4 or 5 year old girl, was still in the house. And two of my firefighters, I'm not quite which ones they were right now, although I have a pretty good idea, rushed into the house as I was setting up or having the truck and everything set up to be able to get hoses and water on the fire. But they rushed in, did a quick search, and came back out with the little girl who was not breathing. And the ambulance happened to arrive with us because they were part of our festivities at the lake. Loaded her up real quick and started their procedures and whatnot. Got her to the hospital, and the little girl survived. So that's a true save that I can say that we had an actual part in and made a difference in. In the 1980s, I particularly remember the Groveland High School fire, as we tend to call it now. The fire started in the early morning hours, presumably by a thief that had broken into one of the classrooms and had tried to steal what he figured would be the gate proceeds from the football game the night before. This would have made the fire being on a Saturday. When we got there, we saw fire pretty much contained to one classroom in the west wing of the building. We pretty much made a fairly quick knockdown of the fire and thought we had it pretty much under control. Thought it was actually, I think we figured we could probably start packing things up and going home, but we kept noticing fire coming out of the vents from underneath the floors throughout at least that wing of the building. Started investigating farther and found out that we had fire underneath these other floors. Now the building construction at that time was one that had been built back in the 1930s Depression area buildings by one of the work programs then, WPA comes to mind. And all the walls of the building were concrete. The roof was concrete on top of steel bar joists, and the floor was all wood flooring on top of big pine timber beams. And all we knew was that the roof had come down at that point on top of the floor in the one classroom, and the floor had collapsed up underneath it. After the fact, we realized that when the roof came down, all that concrete came down that floor and busted through there. It kind of acted as a bellows and pushed fire throughout the underneath of the building through the passageways that were there and the crawl space that they used to put the heating system in for the pipes throughout the building. And the timber beams that were under there had been so full of sap that they were like kindling wood for the fire. So the fire just spread like wildfire underneath. The only recourse we had at that point was to chop holes into all the floors in all the classrooms, or actually every room of the building, and drop through the floors and get to the fire from underneath the floors. We did that, and all in all, it took the whole day to do that. And obviously, since there were quite a number of classrooms and other rooms in the building, it took quite a number of people to do it. Therefore, we had other area fire departments that were helping us with it. And some of those include Claremont, Mascot, Mineola, Lake County, Leesburg, Bassville Park, and there might have been one or two others, I don't recall at this time, but all of those had personnel and or equipment down here helping us. And all were a great help, and basically the the big help came from the standpoint of the personnel that they sent, because we just didn't have the personnel, and we didn't have the wherewithal with the personnel we had to do all the work they had to get through to do that. But we did end up saving the building. The building was rebuilt. It was used until it was converted and torn down and converted into the middle school. And as I said, that's one that I remember and will continue to remember, just because of the significance of what was burning and basically what it took to put it out. Well, once I got married and settled down here, Groveland had been my home and was my home at that time. I really never pictured leaving home. Frankly, I had kids, I had family here and whatnot, and there was no reason to even think about going anywhere else. When I built the house that I'm living in now, the intent was to live there probably until I died. But the whole economy, or not the economy, but things change. Family, I don't have much family here anymore, although when we decided to move, I had less family here than I do now. But two of my three kids are in the area, although my third daughter is in Virginia. My son and daughter that still live in the area, it's hard to tell whether they're going to be here their whole lives or not. And the chances are that they won't be. So we started looking around, or thinking that, we would kind of like to be on water somewhere. And for me, being on water was being on a river, just because you're not limited to just the body of water right there that you're looking at. You've got places you can go on it, this kind of thing. And I started looking around, and we found a place in Alabama that we loved the view and everything else, and we bought that. So moving was not so much as looking to get out of the area that I loved all these years. It was more looking for something different for our retirement years. But as far as Groveland goes, it's changed so much throughout the years that I'm really would like to be around for more years to see how it changes again. Groveland right now is in the process of, to me, making profound changes. We've got park projects going on. We've got the public safety building, which I wanted to see through to completion. Groveland's changing, as I said, and it's. I would love to see I would love to be taking part in all that, but I also feel it's time to look forward to spending my retirement years in a way that we would like to. Just the fact that I would be able to sit on a deck and watch the sun go down and just view a changing, so to speak, landscape in front of me. But Groveland's also hard to leave because I grew up here. My roots are here. And I really like what I have seen transpire, what I've had a part in, although I consider it meager, really. And I just think that it would be a fabulous place for kids to grow up in. When I grew up here, there wasn't anything really to keep us here. At least that's what I thought. Like I say, until I figured out Miami was not the place I wanted to be either. Groveland wasn't so bad. And I hope other people think the same. But the one thing that, as I said before, or might have mentioned before, is that I really miss the groves that were around. The trees, the orange trees, and just driving down a highway and not being able to see anything but green on either side of you, and getting to the top of hills and looking out and seeing the rolling hills of the trees and whatnot. But that's about the only thing. The rest of it's all been very good, and I think Groveland will have a lot to offer the kids growing up here. There's a lot of business that's going in that wasn't here when I grew up. If you wanted a job and did not want to be in the citrus industry when I was growing up, you had to go somewhere else for the most part. For me, I happened to luck into insurance for a short time and then construction, both of which I liked. But all that turned into the fire department, which really, as I have mentioned before, turned a hobby into a career for me. But we've got a lot of friends here that I'll miss when I'm gone, and I think the people in Groveland are and have always been great. As far as the people I've worked with during that time, really can't say that I've met anybody or worked with anybody that I did not enjoy working with. They've all been great. The employees for the city would do anything to help anybody else. As far as my department goes, if I needed anything from any of the other departments, then all I had to do was ask, and they were more than willing to help. And as you know, it's that kind of family that I feel like I'm leaving, and I hope I'll find where we're going in Alabama. And I'm sure I will, although for me, it won't come as easy as it is keeping old friends, and making new friends be much more difficult for me anyway. Some people it's very easy, but I've loved Groveland, always will, and it'll always have a place in my heart.